because through him there is a lot of cultural transfer from east to west. And next to him is Jana Genova, the director of a book platform project and the director of the Bulgarian organization, next page, who is involved in the promotion and development of book publishing in different parts of the world. And I hope you will be able to say more and give more details. Next to Yana is Alla Tatarenko, the Ukrainian Slavic expert in Slavic languages, and she's a professor of at Lviv University, one of the authors of the research published in this blue booklet. And close to me, next to me, is Irina Dmitryshin, a known translator, and she's chairman of the Ukraine department in the university. Let's start by introducing part of the research. It was very simple to discuss the first part of the of our discussion. It was translation of Ukrainian literature into other languages. It's now I would like to give the floor to Alla Tatarenko and Irina Dmitryshin to give a brief account of their research and to say what are the main ways through which Ukrainian literature entered Serbia and France, because you were part of this process. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming here. I would like to welcome you at this forum. First of all, France, to give you more statistical information, each year about 70,000 new books are published in France, of which 20% is novels. Only 15% is translations. Of these, 3/4 are represented by Anglo-Saxon literature. You can imagine how little is covered by Slavic languages, or even Ukrainian language, even less so. As regards Ukraine in France, Ukraine is little known in France. Ukraine has no marker in France, and its literature is in a similar state. If they tell you they heard about Shevchenko, don't be happy. They will know more about Andriy Shevchenko rather than Taras Shevchenko. At least it's another way of learning something about Ukraine, but they will know more about Andriy Shevchenko, the football player, than Taras Shevchenko, the famous writer. As regards books, 15 years ago, I saw a situation, I observed the situation when a French institution wanted to make a presentation of Ukrainian books, and they went to a bookstore. They had three authors: Gogol, Bulgakov, and Babel. That's what they heard about Ukrainian literature. It was an event. If there was a similar event today, they would find Andruhovich, Aderesh, and Zhadan, maybe Maria Matios one next year. They would find these authors today or next year. So talking about how they entered the French market, I'm very pleased to say, to mention the Polish literature and Polish market. The first book translated from Ukrainian to French was Yuri Andruhovich. It was a joint project between Andruhovich and Stasuk, My Europe, called My Europe. When they began to translate from Polish, they realized that it was they decided that it's possible to translate directly from Ukrainian, not through Polish. Because this publishing house was interested in the Polish market to begin with. There was the Polish and German filters are still important for the French market. because Germany performs the role of an expert in Ukraine for France. There are publishers who have been present in the book fairs in Frankfurt, Paris, and these relations with French publishers and the presence of Ukrainian publishers at these fairs shows that there is a book market in Ukraine. There is a readership, and there are writers, and this work is the main road of entering the French market. The authors should and are capable of entering this market, and we should have more similar meetings and forums and exchanges, and this Lviv forum is one of the platforms where contacts can be established, and it's also about translation of foreign authors in Ukraine, because if it's because the publishing houses have different segments, some that deal with national authors, others that deal with publishing copyright, etc. But at least such meetings show that there is a readership audience, etc. And such filters and the availability of translators and agents are important. So the role of translators is very important in France. The name of translators is on the front page always. The translator is a co-author of the book. And there is a trend like in music. When you buy a disc or a performance by Karajan, Rubinstein or Oistrakh, you buy the performer or the conductor and the works that they perform. It shows that the role of this translator is very important. At the end of this month there will be a special festival of translation, so the role of translators is very high. The translators also perform the role of a filter, which I can say more later. I think that everything that will help put Ukraine on the mental map of French people will help promotion of Ukrainian books in France. It could be done through organizing festivals, meetings, through the presence of French reports about the Ukrainian market. There are two centers that publish on the websites reports of their research about different literatures. But today, currently, there is no research done about Ukraine there yet. But maybe the situation looks different in Germany and Poland, but in France, Ukraine is abandoned. I mean, there are no professors of literature or students who could talk about Ukrainian literature as experts. It happened so that in the last 20 to 30 years, there were no experts, or there have been no experts in Ukrainian literature in France. We have to find students who would want to study Ukrainian literature, to be able to evaluate this literature and compare it to other books, to other literatures within a broader European context. And this absence of presence is the biggest break that prevents Ukraine from entering the French market. It's a difficult process. We can't expect our authors to appear on the for foreign markets easily, because it's about the image of a country and the fame of the author and the quality of their books. Because I know that we have a lot of nice authors, writers, and of course these contexts, these things may not give the results immediately, but later they can.
Good evening. First of all, I have to admit, when I was invited to participate in book platform project, I presumed that I'd be writing about translations from Ukrainian into Serbian language. This seemed quite natural because the majority of translations are translations of Ukrainian language into Ukrainian language. But later I found out that I have to deal with the reverse process from Serbian into Ukrainian. So when I offered one of my colleagues who is working her PhD, and the title of her PhD is Ukrainian Literature in Serbia, she says, yes, I can do this. She says, yes, it's a great subject, but I'm not going to do this. Then I referred to another colleague, Helena Pashchenko, and she agreed to help me, but so far this research hasn't been finished. So the outcome is same as in translation. If you want to do something, do it yourself. The situation with the literature, Serbian literature and Ukrainian literature, is quite different. It's different from the situation we have in Ukrainian literature in other countries, because Slavonic literature is West-oriented. There is more market for French, German, English authors. Same is true for Serbian market. They also would like to publish German, French, and American authors, English authors. If something has to be published for the money of foreign institutions, the same is true in Serbia, because publishing houses in Serbia are also poor. They also are fighting with crisis and economic difficulties. That's why they'd like to publish more popular literatures. That's why here we can talk about mutual process of wanting to translate. That's why here we have two not well-off countries who cannot realize in the scope they would want to, the striving to publish the literature of each language. That's why special responsibility lies with people who decide that this is their own business in spite of all institutional and other bureaucratic formalities, and they want Ukrainian literature to exist in Serbia. Prior to that, in the times when the state was called Soviet Union and there was a Republic of Yugoslavia, the things were different. There was governmental policy, there was governmental publishing house, and there were translators who received orders and who received fee for this. And there were some restrictions and limitation of translation freedom, because they had to translate what they had to translate. And things that had to end up in other countries were just kept in secret. Now we can publish anything, but there we have to find money. We have to find funds, and we have to decide what in this mass of literature should be published. What is actually something that deserves readers' attention. And here the role is given to Ukrainian study experts, translators, consultants, who can be both translators and consultants. We have to understand that there is national minority, Ukrainian national minority in Serbia, and it's quite numerous. There is also Ruthenian minority. They have kind of specific relationship. They actually pose themselves as separate minorities, and Ukrainians with origin, they have special attitude to contemporary Ukrainian literature. They all like classical things, they like Shevchenko, Franco, but everything that was published after the 60s or was written after the 60s, they say that this is not Ukrainian, this comes from the devil, this is anti-national, this is globalistic, this is porno, this is drugs, and so on and so forth. So in this situation, we have to deal with stereotypes, which very often prevent contemporary quality literature enter certain environment. except for the language that the representatives of Ukrainian community abroad speak. You know that this language is different from contemporary Ukrainian language, and it's different from the language that most contemporary books are written in. That's why very often I can hear from Ukrainian authors some threatening questions. They say that a person speaks Ukrainian but they don't understand, for example, what Oksana Zabushko says. She doesn't understand what is field study, and she doesn't understand what she writes about. So where to get the translators? In Serbia, they have the Department of Ukrainian Linguistics, the Department of Slavonic Studies, Slavic Studies, and these are the people who actually are experts in Ukrainian language. And this department is chaired by Lyudmila Popova, who is Ukrainian by origin, and she graduated from Kyiv University. So there is a department, they have graduates every year, and scientific research of this department are mainly focused on the language, and few people would like to work with Ukrainian literature. So I ended up in the situation when I came to work with the publisher, and I raised the subject that it would be nice to have some translations from Ukrainian into Serbian, and he said, what exactly would you like to be translated? I said, okay, Andruhovich Perverzia. He said, okay, go ahead, have it translated. Then it turned out that the money offered to translator is very limited, and very few translators who are professionals would want to translate fiction because, for example, translation of legal texts would be much more expensive, and it's much easier and quicker to do it. How fiction translation is different to translation of other sectors of economy, especially when the government doesn't give any support. Maybe the little support is given, but average Serbian reader doesn't know how the money could be received. For example, there is a competition in Serbia every year, and translators know that they can apply. This competition is public, the policy is transparent, there is always a result published, and the money that is allocated to support Serbian literature into other countries. When I was asked a question whether we have anything similar in Ukraine, I couldn't answer. When people said, can we refer to the embassy, I said, you can, but I don't know if the experience exists, if precedents exist. So we don't know where to get the money. We have to publish the book, we have to sell the book, but we don't know where to get the money. And the market has to decide what is quality product and what is not quality product, and what can be profitable, what can be not profitable. And we all know that literature in our contemporary conditions is a product, and the product has to be marketable. We have to have presentations, we have to address media, we have to present information about these things, and we have to form public consciousness about these things, what is good, what is not good. When we talk about translations, we have a long-lasting tradition of translations from Polish, Russian, Serbian, but at the same time from Ukrainian into other languages we have very few works. And during Soviet Union times, Yugoslavia, any Yugoslavian authors were translated into Ukrainian through Russian as an intermediate language. Only recently things were translated from Ukrainian into the languages of former Yugoslavian Republic directly. Recently I started thinking about the ways what could be done in order to make this interest to literature a little bit lively, more lively and vibrant. First of all, the literature has to exist in the consciousness, and there should be some associations with something recognizable and something bright. The first writer who arrived at the Forum of Publishers in Serbia, prior to that, different people were invited to Serbia to different events, but within this forum it was Yuri Andruhovich who presented his novel Perverzia, and who also gave the lecture on the contemporary Ukrainian literature. I should say that Andruhovich didn't speak on his behalf, he actually spoke on behalf of other people, and it's not frequent that writers actually speak on behalf of other people because they'd like to popularize themselves rather than other people. But This actually produced a certain effect, and the journalists took down the names, and there were different representatives of different publishing houses, festivals, editors, and they addressed him with a question: can you invite this author for a visit to us? And for example, except Yuri Andruchovich, besides Yuri Andruchovich, Mykola Ryabchuk, Irena Karpa, Serhiy Zhadan, Lyubko Derich, they all were invited to Serbia to visit different events. And these are people who have something to say and who know how to say and how to present Ukrainian literature in different aspects. But these are single-time actions, single-time events. You know that a month after the event, the news is in the past, it's history. That's why when I was trying to make my conclusions, what should be done, I'll try to write it down. The first thing, what should be done? To present the sufficient quality of high quality translators who would have adequate theoretical and practical training, because before we have high quality translators we cannot speak about the breakthrough of Ukrainian literature. Translating a book does not mean that you have to do the way you want, you have to do it in the quality level. It should not necessarily be a person who knows the words, but who knows how to translate text and context. And to do this you have to have good experience. Internship for young people. We have to learn experience of events from previous years. We have to organize summer schools for translators. Translators have to see Ukraine, they have to hear the writers, they have to understand what's going on. Translator Yelena Milanovic, who participated in translation forum, translation workshop, she is now one of the most renowned translators from Ukrainian into Serbian language. The third is popularization of outcomes of Ukrainian literature in the world, publishing the articles about the contemporary state of Ukrainian literature, also about people, renowned people in periodicals, to issue digests, to write reviews in different languages about Ukrainian literature. Here we do not talk only about Serbian literature, because Serbs also read English, and if something is successful in the West, it will be successful in Slavic East as well. When people have no idea about our literature, they might come across some of the book of a translator and they might understand that this is a genius, and one day this book might be published in their language without financial support of a country. That's why Ukrainian professionals have to help foreign Slavic scientists not to make short lists, but they have to introduce them the books so that the readers could understand who is who. And if there is little number of translators in East City, I understand it should be done both in Western languages and Russian language likewise. Also, there should be arrangements with media people so that they could make programs and highlight events of Ukrainian literature in the world. So I think that everyone has access to radio and television, so if something is if there is a program about a book during a radio or TV program, I think it might become popular one day. Also, translations should be supported from both languages, from target language into recipient and so on. We know that there was the anthology published of Vinnychuk about postmodern short stories, also 101 novels. This is the 10 best novels in each country that have to be translators into 9 other languages, and thus we will have, as a result, we will have 100 novels translated into 9 different languages. I know that there are such projects in other countries. I don't know who is in charge of such a project in Ukraine. I asked Alexandra Koval, I asked different people, no one could give me any information. Maybe Ukraine ceased to exist from the map of this project, and this 100 novels is non-existent anymore. Maybe it's a secret project that no one knows about, but this is a chance we cannot miss, we cannot lose, because Ukrainian works will be presented in 10 different countries, Be it good or bad, it should be done. Also, we have to make contacts with libraries in Serbia and Ukraine, and we can ensure in this way access to contemporary literature. For example, they will regularly send copies of new books published in Serbia to Ukrainian literature, and likewise. Also, we have to provide financial support of translations from Ukrainian languages. I already mentioned the project from the Ministry of Education of Serbia, who give financial support yearly. Nothing like that is done in Ukraine. Also, we have to encourage people to participate in different events. We have Aneta Antonenko here, who represents Kalvaria, and this is the only book publisher who presented Ukraine in Serbia, and this is the biggest fair in Balkan region. We love Book Forum in Lviv, but this is much bigger event and a much more powerful event. And to recap, I'd say that we need to stimulate translation activity of the best translators from Ukrainian into other languages. They have to be invited to literally events and festivals of other countries, because people like to be noticed. Also, we need to make association of translators from Ukrainian literature and others. We have to strengthen cooperation between translators, provide translation help, consultations, and translators should have a reference information about each other. Allah, I think that we can make a full stop here, because you have exhausted the subject so much. But generally speaking, I think your proposals are really brilliant. The question is now whether they can be realized, how they can be realized, what tools could be used to realize them. How they can be realized, based on my own experience, I'd say that 7 years I worked as a correspondent in Belgrade radio, and every week I prepared the program about Ukrainian literature and Ukrainian culture, and I did it for 7 years. I believe that over 7 years somebody heard something. I wrote 5 articles about contemporary Ukrainian literature for Serbian journals. And I think such practice and such things could be done in every country. Of course, this is your time, this is your investment. You can invest this time differently, but if you want things to be done, you have to do it themselves. You have to somehow motivate students, you have to motivate young people to do this, because one person can do little, but the person can do as much as to show example, and this example to popularize Ukrainian literature abroad, because if you don't love your job, you cannot promise anything to new generations, to future generations. Thank you very much. Irino, brief question to you. How things are with translation infrastructure in France, because this is a big country, this is popular language, but are there translators, good quality translators, professional translators who can translate literature, not only representatives of diaspora who can translate words? Yes, we have translation schools, but mainly they translate into English. Or from English. Unfortunately, we don't have as many translators from Ukrainian and Russian into French and vice versa. They rather learn language, they master the language, maybe they also master translation, but there is unfortunately no systematically developed curriculum or program of teaching Ukrainian translation, and unfortunately there are not as many candidates who would like to do this. So if there is Ukrainian translator, he can be involved into all those programs that exist for translators. These are summer schools, this is governmental support, and this is a possibility to visit a country. And I think in this respect, Ukraine should be more active, and they should be more proactive in doing this work, because they understand that the world cannot spontaneously get interested in our literature and in our country, so it doesn't happen spontaneously. It should be done the way Polish Cultural Center works, Czech Cultural Center works, Hungarian Cultural Center works. So it's nothing to compare with Ukrainian. I understand that this is the question of staff, this is the question of personnel, finance, but this is the way things should be done. Thank you very much. The next question I'd like to address to Mr. Fikulu, and this is the question about the general perception of Ukrainian literature, culture, and Ukraine as a country, because Germany was mentioned as one of the recipient languages of Ukrainian literature. So using cultural ties of Germany and Ukraine, Ukraine is not terra incognita for German book market. So what does this market expect culturally and literally, in terms of cultural and literal representation? Because if I am not mistaken, there is a danger that Ukraine can be recognized only due to Shevchenko, the footballer, or the feminization of feminine members, and it is a threat because it can be counterproductive to Ukrainian literature. So what is the situation in Ukraine these days? The country which knows Ukraine better than any other countries. I'll be speaking Russian because I understand and speak Russian much better. I am a writer and translator. I'm not the cultural manager and I'm not the governmental representative because I do not feel responsible for the fate of Ukrainian literature in Germany. What I'm interested in is good writers. If I find someone, I'm interested how to popularize and promote this person in Germany. I'm not interested in masses, I'm not interested in money. I'm happy if there is money, but I'm not money focused and I do not bear responsibility for getting money. But I'd like to understand translators and writers, and from this viewpoint I have to admit that to compare with Poland, there is too little active marketing among Ukrainian publishers. We don't get any information actively from the publishing houses about some fragments of translation, about some reviews, in order to get some information, to get some knowledge. Practically everything actually it's only our initiative. The Polish Institute of Book, as it has been mentioned here, publish a certain catalog of interesting new publications. That's why a lot depends on individuals. For example, Lexus did it in Germany for Polish literature. He has been fighting for years so that Polish literature should be noticed. He did not only translate, but he also popularized and promoted Polish literature in Germany. As of today, for Ukrainian literature, such people such people as Katarina Radel, this is the editor of Zudel publishing house, Katarina Statevich, who works in and lives in Germany. So they actually play the role of those individuals who are trying to popularize Ukrainian literature. I also talked today with Svetlana Sklar, who represents the publishing house Семейный досуг. She was in the book fair in Leipzig and she was trying to come across some Ukrainian authors in this publishing house. They said, we have no readers and we have no editors who can actually estimate this literature, evaluate this literature, which means that Ukrainian literature is not presented adequately in Germany. Only in Vienna and in Greifswald, these are two places where Ukrainian literature is still popular, and there are few readers who are interested in Ukrainian literature, and there are very few good professional translators. We have to develop them, we have to train them, to educate them. I think this is all interconnected, interrelated. And the last thing I'd like to mention is the image of the country. I believe that it's very important in order for the literature to be perceived. I think that the image of the country is important. France, Great Britain, United States of America, they have a certain reputation and certain image. Something that has been done in France or something that is happening in France, I think that it draws attention of German publishers and readers. And in case of Ukraine, I think that you should just prepare this ground for the image, because things do not happen by themselves. Ukraine cannot be noticed out of nothing. What was Poland back to 2000? Poland was the center of, how do we say this? Was the center of the book fair in Frankfurt, and I think that was the milestone year for having Polish literature liven up in the world, because that was organization of the reception of Polish literature. There was positive and negative cult, because there were certain authors that probably did not deserve to be translated and did not deserve to be presented, but this was the wave of enthusiasm and anxiety. But for Ukraine, I think the good event was Orange Revolution back to 2004, and I noticed that after this event, after the Orange Revolution, Germany was becoming more and more open to Ukraine and Ukrainian literature. They asked even the author Andrei Bongar to write for a certain publishing house, and Havrilo also wrote for another publishing house. But I think that this interest to Ukrainian literature actually decreased slightly, dropped slightly. Today, the situation in Ukraine is the following, that people don't know, they don't have any security, they don't have stability, they don't know whether Ukrainian language will exist tomorrow, and whether the country takes Western vector or Eastern vector and reunites with Russia. And this instability actually affects the literature a lot, whether you want it or not. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to give the floor to Yana Genova, who would probably draw some conclusions of the results of this research studies, and maybe make general recommendations taking into account this vibrant spectrum of the countries and languages that participated in the study.
I'll try to be as brief as possible, although I'm really tempted not to talk briefly, because I'm very passionate about the subject, as everybody else here. First of all, I really think, Neda, that football is not damaging to literature. It could be on the contrary. So think about it. Maybe we have to ask our Scottish colleague whether whiskey is damaging to literature, whether having this image all over the world
not the football, but in general, even this too sexy style.
I have been invited here by the moderator, and I was asked to try to put all this conversation about Ukrainian literature in the world into the wider context of other countries that are perhaps in a similar situation, or in the wider context of promoting literatures that are, as we say, marginalized. So this is not an evaluative statement about the quality of the literature. It's not about smaller literatures in terms of big and small, or the number of people who write in that language. It's true that nowadays we have centers of production that are more or less dictating what is going on in the publishing literature globally. So I had the privilege to follow these processes in Central and Eastern Europe and in the Arab countries for the last 15 years. And I have to tell you, there are a few things that always come up at discussions like this, few issues that always come up. Rhetorical questions. First of all, of course, this is all, we try to speak to normalize this topic, but it's charged with a lot of emotions and resentment sometimes. That's everywhere. The questions that come up very often, and they came up here as well to one extent or another, is why aren't they interested in us? I mean, you can phrase it differently. Why the hell aren't they interested? Or why are they reproducing the cliches all the time? This is like, you can hear it from Arabic writers complaining that, especially after September 11, the boom of translations from Arabic, it's all about terrorism and veiled women. You could hear that in the 90s from ex-Yugoslavian publishers saying, okay, yeah, there is a boom of translations from Serbo-Croatian or however the language is called nowadays, but it's all about the war. You could see at Frankfurt, you could see this, this French or British or German publishers chasing everybody from ex-Yugoslavia, trying to get their hands on something about the war. So Ukraine is really not unique in that matter. There are really regions in the world where it is even worse. Another complaint that we hear over and over again, all over the world, why is it always the same authors? What is that they love about Andruchowicz that he is translated so much? And the last thing is, what do we, as Ukrainians in that case, what do we have to offer to them? My problem with this way of thinking is that it supposes that there is us and them. It supposes that there is one world over there that receives translations of our literature, and it also supposes that there is one single thing called Ukrainian literature. And I invite you to think about that. In this little brochure, there is a summary of the 10 wonderful, by the way, wonderful studies. And we've heard the French example and the Serbian example, and I really want to sincerely thank you for the quality of your work. But most of these country studies are really of excellent quality, and they can be used in a variety of ways by publishers, translators, authors, etc. In this little brochure, there is a list of all the possible instruments that can be used for promoting Ukrainian literature abroad. But there is also there are also a few points that are called here strategic dilemmas, but you can call them as you wish. I want to quickly go through two of them, which are very briefly described here, and invite you to participate in a discussion on them. One dilemma or issue is what is that we actually want to do when we promote Ukrainian literature abroad. Because very often we talk about promotion of literature as promotion of the country. And even in a literature field, we put an equation mark between these two things. I do have a problem, as somebody coming from a literature field, I have a problem with that, for at least two reasons. First of all, the expectation that a certain author is representative of the national literary tradition is highly problematic. The expectation that literature can play the diplomatic roles played in other fields of politics like foreign policy, that literature can be used in foreign policy because it brings peace in the world, roughly speaking, is problematic because literature could be subversive, and that's partly its role. The expectation that we have to select the best of the contemporary Ukrainian, Bulgarian, Arabic, or no matter what literature and offer it to the world is also problematic to me. Because it assumes that there should be one strategy. It assumes that there is one single canon from Shevchenko to nowadays, and that's what we are offering to the world. Otherwise, the world will not be able to grasp the entire complexity of Ukrainian literature. What is offered here in this brochure as an alternative to the approach, which I call the approach of literary export, so the approach that says literature is part of the foreign cultural policy. The alternative is could be spelled out in terms of dialogue and communication and an attempt to have an equal dialogue. Which means, Nela mentioned that earlier, and yeah, this discussion is called to both ways street, and it's not that much about exporting and pushing out certain authors, but it's a mutual communication. And my last point, in that respect, promoting literature abroad really starts at home. It starts here. It starts. It is very much dependent on how much a country is open to translations from other languages. I'd like you to know that the rise of Ukrainian translations into other languages started in the early 2000s. Somehow the publishing industry became stronger. This also reflected into the translations abroad. Yeah, I'll perhaps stop here. I also had some statistics. Do you have 1 minute more to just show you the numbers? Because I was asked by Nela to give a comparison. We have to be careful with numbers, as always. This is almost a random selection of languages. Can you see that? Yes. The first column is something happened with the technology, but sorry. Okay. Yeah, something happened with the technology. If we are to believe the statistics, translations from Ukrainian into the major European languages are actually doing quite well. It's true that out of the how many? Out of the 70 titles translated over the last 20 years into English, 17 are Kurkov. That's true. We have 70. It's true that out of the 60 titles translated into German, that's quite a low number, by the way, given how important German is as a gateway to other major and not major languages. Out of the 60 titles, 1/3 is Andruchovich and Zabushko. With other languages such as Bulgarian, for example, we have reverse situation. There is almost not a single author that has more than one title into the major European languages. So you have, with Ukrainian, you have this deep penetration of one author or two authors at the expense of the variety of choices. With other peripheral languages, we have just the reverse. They never do it again. They try once. Febu or whatever, Acdut, important publishers of translations in France. They publish one Bulgarian author, they fail, they say, oh no, this country never again. Reversely, with Ukraine, they are successful with authors that, no matter what you might think about them here in Ukraine, this brings along other Ukrainian authors that are being published afterwards. Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Величезне спасибі. Я би хотіла зараз дати можливість
I would like to provide an opportunity to the audience to ask questions if you have any of such questions, but please be concise. I have a great experience of promoting activity on all continents. I have 6,000 articles in my database. Ukrainians abroad, there are 20 million Ukrainians abroad. Aren't they a platform for developing, for promoting our literature abroad? But we have to deal with this according to our vision. If Ukrainians read something, they share it with their colleagues. All of them are babysitters. So there are Ukrainians who have been there for many generations, whose grandparents immigrated. So therefore I suggest that if you want not just to talk and forget, but if you want to deal with this problem, I can help you, because I have experience in entrepreneurial activity of 23 years. I am a legal entity and a physical entity. I am a translator, German, from German, English, Russian. I'm professional. I can help you. So thank you. Thank you. That was an offer rather than a question. Are there any questions? Unless there are questions, then we can give another round of discussion and discuss the presidential decree 336, which was mentioned and analyzed in this brochure. And there was an attempt to discuss this decree. Unfortunately, we don't have here the person who was responsible for this decree who could comment, but I would like to ask your opinion, expert's opinion. Maybe somebody from the audience can provide their opinion if you have read this decree. So what does it offer? Does it offer any prospects of theoretical and practical promotion? How would you evaluate this decree, presidential decree? I would like to address this question to Jana once again, because as I said in the summary of this brochure, they analyzed this decree. Maybe Jana, could you analyze the opinion of your colleague?
This is a complicated question. I don't have any relations to the Ukrainian president. I try to read the decree in Ukrainian because there is no English translation available that I could find. The so-called policy recommendations in this other brochure concerning translations into Ukrainian. There is somebody called Peter Inke, who is a cultural policy expert from Hungary. He bothered to write down a number of measures that could be applicable and can boost translations in Ukraine. And he bothered to see which of these measures are in the presidential decree already. And most of them are, actually. So, I don't know, as an outsider, for me, this is an important step forward if there is a political document like this. It is, however, the task of the civil society and the professionals in the book sector to follow whether any of these good intentions in the decree are actually implemented. I personally, with my very poor Ukrainian, I noticed that they are using the expression social advertisement, and that they want to boost promotion of reading by means of social advertisement, which is a great step forward, that a presidential decree is using that expression and that notion, and perhaps they even know what they mean when they say it. But that's as much as I can say about it.
Thank you very much. I have a few questions and regarding this decree, but I'm afraid that I'm not quite competent to evaluate this item, such as extension of tax breaks for publishers until the year 2019. I always hear from publishers, it's not so much privileges, it's not because it's not so much about privileges granted to publishers. May I invite Aneta Antonenko to the discussion, who was one of the inspirers and who cooperated in the creation of this in the creation of this decree. I was involved in the in providing expert opinion for this decree, and regarding this tax breaks. We have tax breaks at the end of each year. We think whether they would be extended or not. So far we managed to defend these tax breaks, but we don't know how long it will last, because we have a policy that there is the law about these tax breaks, but any next budget can cancel them. So far we managed to defend these tax breaks. If our president if Afonin continues to become our president, of our union, we will continue to have these breaks. But there is another item of interest: state grants for translation. This issue is being discussed in the State Committee. They are supposed to create a working group because this question is ambiguous. There are two options. One option is progressive and normal. There will be state grants provided for to foreign publishing houses cooperating with our State Committee, and they will be granted funds according to the French scheme, as it's done in France or in Spain, or if the negative side prevails, then we may have an unpleasant situation whereby these grants will be given to Ukrainian publishers so that they publish books in 4 other languages. If this happens, it will be a catastrophe. Now we have the Association of Publishers that they fight progressive publishers who are aware of the situation. They try to persuade civil servants to make sure that this should be done the way it's done in other countries. Of course, we'll be conducting monitoring, and we'll write a memo for the State Committee where we will describe the situation as it works in other countries, how these grants are provided in the Polish Institute or in France or in Spain. We want them to have a look and to see and take this experience as a basis. I hope that this normal system prevails and has the upper hand, because Alexei Kononenko, the chairman of the department dealing with publishing in the State Committee, he supports this normal system. We hope that he will manage to persuade others and the government. I very much hope this will happen. Then it will be easier for us to work in this sphere and support foreign publishing houses to make sure translating Ukrainian literature. Now there is only one private foundation by Arseny Yatsenyuk Foundation that provides funds to foreign publishing houses translating Ukrainian authors. Among the grants provided by them, there are 14 grants as far as I remember. Andruhovich has been translated in this, Darish in France, Zabushko, Kononenko in England. These translations have been done, but this is a private foundation. It can't solve many problems, but at least it can support a few translations. That's a step, at least some step. That's what I wanted to say.
Does anybody know how much money we are talking about?
Мікрофон не включений, мікрофон не включений. Her microphone is not on. The first sum mentioned was there would be 2.5 thousand euros per grant. It's an average sum used in other countries throughout the world. I'm more or less aware of the situation. I know how much they allocate in other countries, but the general total sum is, I can't say exactly, but maybe roughly. We went to the stand there and they said they only provide money for translation, not for publishing, only for translation. You have to talk to the publishers. Yes, that's how it's done in other countries, everywhere. I think it's absolutely normal. It should be like that. Did we understand correctly? Are we talking about the Open Ukraine Foundation or state support for translation? So, did you answer the question about the Yatsenyuk Foundation? Yeah, 2-3 grants provided by Yatsenyuk Foundation. I'll give you, I think it's 10,000 euros per year in some years. But when we talk about state money, I can say 20,000 euros per year provided by the state. But there is but if we have a Yatsenyuk Foundation plus state foundation, if we combine these foundations or these funds, there will be 30,000 euros per year. At least it's something. I would like to tell our foreign partners, Yana, to warn you not to be optimistic, euphoric. I would like to say that in the last 20 years there have been I think up to 10 presidential decrees and government regulations that, according to experts, haven't been fulfilled even 5%. They haven't been fulfilled even 5%. I would like to remind everyone that even under President Kuchma, there was a program according to which Ukrainian centers like Goethe Institute, like the Book Institute, were supposed to be open throughout the world. Nothing has been done. Nothing. And this presidential decree, by the way, has a dangerous thing, which the professionals have mentioned already, such as crossing the border by foreign books. It's in favor of Russian books, by the way. It's something dangerous, but the only positive, optimistic thing about this decree, we shouldn't have many illusions, is that this problem is dealt with by Alexei Kononenko, and we mentioned already this program with 32 million or 40 million being allocated annually, but every year less and less, for the Ukraine book. Last year, if I remember well, either 12 or 16 translations have been funded through this program. Last year they were funded through this program, yes. And thanks to Kononenko, he used to be a journalist, he's a writer. He's trying to do something in this environment. He proposed one thing which was supported. It was a program of supporting Nobel Prize winners into Ukrainian. Aneta also has some experience of working with publishers, and what she advises to him may serve, it can inspire some optimism, but in general I'm not optimistic. So we still stay with Allah's opinion that it's down to individuals and individual responsibility and individual will and desire. Right? Are there any more questions or comments, ideas?
Okay, yeah, that's good that we stay with the individual instead of relying on the state. But what we see is that translators from Ukrainian into other languages are gradually aging, passing away, unfortunately, or shifting into starting to work with other languages which are more easy to market, like Polish or Russian. So, I mean, we can rely on the individual's motivation and passion until a certain moment, at a certain degree.
I agree with you completely. I agree with you completely. And looking at this general migration in this hall, I would like to invite all of you to ask a question or make a comment if you have. Unless this oh, okay, I'm sorry. I represent the Ukrainian Printing Academy. I think there was a very important opinion about the problems of translation of Ukrainian literature into other languages is a problem, a political problem, and it's not like we are not going to be interesting to the world tomorrow. If we are of interest, many issues or problems will be resolved automatically, because it depends on the market situation. If there is demand, if there is fashion, especially like the fashion after the Orange Revolution, we didn't have to do even anything after the Orange Revolution. There was a great interest. It was a driving force. So this problem has two components: the commercial component with all its and this cultural component, which were mentioned by Allah when she mentioned personal contacts, moving from small things to bigger things. And our people who travel around the world, and she mentioned one, I think Andruhovich, who's not just a brilliant author, he's also a brilliant speaker and promoter. He's one among the leaders. It's a human factor, you know. We can't wait for anything from the state. I'm even afraid of state programs, because given our conditions, of course, we shouldn't expose our skeleton in the cupboard to everyone, but given our state, if we rely on the state, everything quickly turns into protectionism, lobbying for particular authors. And one more factor: we always look to the market which we are of no interest, let's face it. But there are some segments of market on the international map for which we would be of interest, more interest, higher interest. As a researcher, I have done research into children's literature, and at some international congresses I try to analyze the situation of children's literature in Ukraine, Poland, Russia, Hungary, and Central and Eastern Europe. I talk to my colleagues from the old world, uh, uh, and there was some polite reaction, no more than that, no more than that. But during these campaigns, we understood that we are of interest to each other, and our communication with Baltic colleagues was much more efficient. There was nothing. There was no just mere politeness. There was a vivid, live interest in our relations with our Baltic colleagues. But here lies the problem of translators, because we have to translate to our literature to the languages of other small countries, such as Baltic countries, which are a bit isolated linguistically. I don't know what has to happen for us to become attractive to the world, but I think there are countries to which we are of interest by default, because we have, for example, a common past, shared past, because, well, this is also politics. And of course, I would rely more on publishers, although in this country it's much more difficult. Why? Because for 15 years I've been trying to define the notion of state book, children's state book. It's difficult. No matter... there is a question, in what language it should be translated. For example, in countries with bilingual countries, are we a political nation? So providing support for literatures or particular authors that have to be translated into Ukrainian in Ukraine, given our lingual cultural situation, is very difficult, because Poland is consolidated. Poland has concrete, clear-cut proposals when they talk to the world. They have experts, enjoying high popularity, authority. Therefore, the question of who to publish, who to translate into other languages, in Poland they are consolidated. We are not. We have to have authorities, like people who enjoy high reputation. When these are private initiatives, it's more mosaic, but it's more interesting, because it could be about different other authors. Therefore, this problem is multifaceted. I would rely more on personal contacts, human factor, on interesting people who are of interest to the world, and on publishers who would believe these people and would do this thing, which is very difficult. Thank you very much. Are there any more comments? I think we don't have to reinvent a bicycle. If we see how the world wins information space, they start with children's literature. Let's look at Harry Potter. The book conquered the world. Even our translator became a millionaire. I don't know, I don't count other people's money, but our translator of Harry Potter has become very rich. So Ukrainians are very peaceful by mentality. They're very submissive and very naive. We have to be aggressive on the market. We should be aggressive as Ukrainians, not as Russian speaking or Ukrainian speaking, but we have to promote our own system in our country, the promotion system, the system content is of not importance. There are 20 million Ukrainians living on all the continents. If you want to do this thing, let's sit down and work. I have 22 years of personal experience. You can talk to me and I can help. Thank you. You are opening my eyes. You are opening my eyes. However, a provocation is also a very interesting moment of discussion. I would like to say one thing. You see, in publishing business there are laws. These laws are systemic, and we can't enter this market aggressively. We can enter this market using our personal connections when we promote a few authors, a few publishing houses. But it also depends on the tastes of publishers. It's true, there are laws in every country, there are tastes available in every country. We can't just enter the market aggressively. We have some good results, we have some average results, but it's a very slow thing, very slow. That's my answer to you. Let's live using our laws and our realities. I've been working on this for 20 years. I suggest that we calm down the level of our discussion. We have already mentioned football, the kicking and aggressiveness, but I have some question about the importance of public authority, public figures who are into reputation, reputable figures. That also could pose a danger if we employ people with high reputation only. Of course, this discussion is only a beginning. There are many problems that are still unresolved. I don't think we can offer immediate solution. I suggest that our experts have the final word. Thank you. At the end of this discussion, having heard many interesting opinions, I would like to wish the organizers of this forum the following. Foreign authors coming here can potentially become promoters of Ukrainian literature. If they come here, they meet the Ukrainian colleagues here, and these mutual contacts are of great importance. From my experience of participation in different forums, I have to say that a number of Serbian and Croatian writers came back home with a great interest in the country which had until then been unknown to them. They had some experience of working here, and when they had when they meet these people next time, the people that they met here, when they see again, they may become great friends. Of course, these people, should form a tandem. This small crumb or small piece of Ukrainian literature begins to travel around the world, and writers who are intellectuals, most writers are intellectuals, before going to another country, they want to know something about writers in these countries. For example, if you talk to them, I can ask a question: which Ukrainian authors do you know? In order to know them, they have to read their books in translation in Western languages or in their own language. Therefore, I would like to say that the Publishers Forum is also a great step in this mutual understanding and of cultures. Therefore, I urge you to go and meet more cultures, more literatures, and do this thing together. I think it was a very nice summary, conclusion, and now I would like to remind you that it's not only this forum that organizes such literary meetings. Of course, we are here and we're very grateful to this forum for their hospitality and for their cooperation within this project. We know that there are a few other important players in this field. I mean, Open Ukraine Foundation, Akhmetov Foundation, other cultural events and festivals. Therefore, there is a hope if we move away from the polar optimism, pessimism scheme and look at the world simpler. I hope there is something we can work on. I would like to thank members of this discussion and to the audience for your active involvement. Here, I would like to say that we wrap it up. We wrap this discussion up. Which was this discussion was organized by Book Platform jointly with the Book Publishing Forum, and the Goethe Institute, and the Yatsenuk Foundation, and Calvaria Foundation. To conclude, I would like to invite all of you to a reception in 10 minutes to Zihar Center. Then now we can stand up and go there together. Have a nice evening. Okay.
Супер. Шия щось мене болить в таких подіях.
Прошу?
Мене щось болить шия під час таких подій.